It's really exciting to be here and see a bunch of people that I've seen before at events like this. And awesome to be able to talk to you guys about some of the work we've done over the past year at Okta to stabilize our tests, our Selenium tests. And I just wanted to share with you some of the strategies that we came up with to do that. So I've spent, in my life, I've set up and run about 4 different companies, Selenium test harness systems and other systems for testing. And one of them was wildly successful and completely amazing. One of them was hideously failed, and 2 of them were kind of in the spectrum of pretty good and so-so. And I think that it's one thing to set up a bunch of Selenium tests and get the system up and running. It's another thing to maintain it. And the cost of Selenium maintenance, I think, is something that a lot of companies struggle with. That really kind of makes people wonder, like, I think test automation is a great thing, but I'm a little bit worried about, the cost of maintenance over time. Maybe, is it worth it? And of course, the answer to that question is always yes. You should never manually test. You should always test in an automated way. But and I think that test maintenance in general gets a lot harder as you scale. So it's one thing to do it, with a kind of relatively simple web application with a small team and maybe one or 2 people focused on the task. It's another thing to do it for a larger company with lots of things going on, a more complex web application, and a larger number of developers who are all contributing back with features and changes to the test. So the company I work for a company named Okta. We're hiring, by the way. I'm going to say that now since I'm presenting. So if you're interested, we're hiring Java developers, software engineer and tests, and lots of other positions, so find me afterwards if you're interested. Okta is a startup. We just closed our 2nd round of funding, and we do single sign-on and identity management for companies right now. Hopefully we'll expand out for other things. So one username, one password for the internet. That's actually not our value add. What our real value is, I actually didn't know this before I started working at Okta, but if you're an IT administrator and someone starts and you manage a company and someone joins the company, apparently it's really annoying to have to go in and manually create accounts in all these web applications that your business uses. And then when they leave, you have to go out and manually deactivate them, and maybe you forget some, and so there's these dangling places where people can access systems with company data, and then when they're working there, they forget their password and they bother you about helping them remember their password or resetting it. So we basically streamline that whole process for IT people, and they just love it. They're just that's so awesome. It's sort of interesting. I didn't realize that would be so valuable, but it is. But as an end user, what you do is you come to our website and you log in with your one set of credentials, and then from there, there's a portal that will let you authenticate to all of the stuff that you use, both for your business and personal. So that's kind of a nice experience too, as an end user. The web application is written in Java. We have a bunch of other things that we write, and we use different languages depending on what's needed. We have a lot of Python that just sort of grows into the code base, and maybe 6 months ago we decided to start refactoring our Java code into Scala to try and compromise, get some of the functional programming aspects into our product and our test, but that was something that could actually run in the JVM and be still, have all of the usual JVM hooks and monitoring tools that we use work. So that's cool. Okay, so we use the standard set of tools. I'm sure you guys are familiar with all these things. All of our stuff we do in the cloud. So we don't have any servers that we control. It's all running in EC2. We use SaaS Labs for all of our Selenium clients. GitHub holds our source code, and then et cetera, et cetera. So just some key kind of points about where we are now with testing so you guys understand where we're at. So we do continuous integration. We have two main branches right now, master and release. And anytime there's a check-in, it automatically kicks off a build and a bunch of tests and a bunch of Selenium tests. We do weekly releases. We got a lot of tests. We have like 11,000 tests total, 8,000 unit tests, 3,000 Selenium tests. I don't know, is that a lot? I don't know, actually. Do you guys have more tests than that? Less? The same? It's a lot for me, and growing. We test on all the major browsers except for Safari and Mac, which we're hoping to include soon. And our test run is actually really fast. It takes about 90 minutes to test everything completely and be completely sure that the change is totally safe and push it to production. It takes about 6 hours to do basically exhaustive testing, more testing than we really want to do. But if we were to run everything, it would take about 6 hours. We don't have a QA team. We will have no plans for a QA team. We do no manual testing. And all of the developers write the tests as they're writing their features. Nobody is like charged with writing tests. It's part of a development process that everyone does. And then we also use a tool called Burp, which is sort of similar to Selenium. It's like it sort of runs as a proxy server, and it tries to do SQL injection and cross-site scripting and sort of common security attacks and find things. And then we work with a company named ISEC that does quarterly kind of security reviews, and we do load and performance testing when we need to. So when I started at Okta about a year ago, there were some really great things about the company. There were a lot of things that could be improved, but there were some really awesome things. And the biggest one was basically I was hired by a guy named Todd McKinnon who used to work for Salesforce, and he just totally understood that test automation needs to be built in from the beginning of the product. And that was something that he just knew in his mind, and that, if we invested in it now, it would pay off hundreds of thousands of times later. So he was totally behind building out a full automated test system for the product and investing in it heavily, spending a lot of money and hiring a lot of people to do it. And the engineering team was really committed to this, even though, things maybe weren't working as well as they could be. They did a lot of unit testing. Some people did test-driven development. A lot of people did pair programming. So the agile culture was really positive, which is awesome. But our actual system that we were running for testing was not that great, actually. So we had the executive kind of, leeway, or the executive commitment. We had a great team, but our system was really almost not even usable. We had like a main integration branch that people would check stuff into whenever they wanted to, really. And then not immediately, but at some point later, like once every 2 days, some job would run in some weird Jenkins somewhere, and would run through all of our tests, and it took forever. It took like 2 days or 1 day, and then when the test finally finished, there were tons and tons of failures. Nobody knew why. It took days to figure out. So it was basically really bad. Oh yeah, and we only tested on Firefox 3.6 on Linux. We didn't test on any other browser. And we ran all of our Selenium tests. We had massive tests, so we ran them all. So the first thing that we did was we signed up with SaaS Labs. It was sort of an easy sell, actually. It's like, look, we have no clue why these tests are failing. If we work with SaaS Labs, we will know. And we'll know in like 0 seconds, because there's a full log of exactly what happened, a video, all of the test metadata, screenshots, and we can immediately start testing on all of the browsers that we want. So that was incredible. There was a huge, huge value add immediately, and we started seeing a huge return on investment there, just in terms of debugging time, developers debugging the tests. That time went to like 0. So the next thing that we did was we were using JUnit 3 as a test runner. And so we refactored that and decided to use TestNG in order to parallelize the run. And it actually took a while. There was a lot of code in our test code that was not thread safe. And a lot of the anti-pattern of some tests had to change state in the system, and then only when that happened did the test that came 5 tests later actually pass. And so, kind of picking all those dependencies apart. and setting up a bunch of APIs that we could use to dynamically create stuff that we needed to in order to run on the same system in parallel. But when we finally finished that, we actually had some awesome results. We cut the runtime time down from about a day to about 2 hours, which was huge. So we had all these great things. We had the executive buy-in. We had a great team. We were using SaaS Labs successfully. We had parallelized the run. And so this is sort of the picture of where things looked. We were testing all of these browsers, and we were doing it. Each browser took about 2 hours, and the debug time was great. But we still had a lot of failures, actually, a lot. And people had to spend a lot of time, like every week, why is this failing? Let's look at it. And so that was still kind of tough and expensive. So then we moved from Subversion to Git. And this was like revolutionary. Each one of these things that we did was hugely successful for us. But this was, I think, almost the most important one, or I don't know, a very top, high up there. We could start working in topic branches. And I don't know, it seems so simple, but the idea that you could actually have like 40 topic branches on your hard drive and switch to a different branch in seconds and actually do that, you can't do that with Subversion. It's just impossible. And really, there's just no excuse not to use Git at this point, in my opinion. So we basically implemented a rule where if you're working on a bug fix or a feature, you have to create a topic branch and do it there first. As this was happening, we got smart about what kind of tests we were running. So I developed some code that would basically look at production usage, and then based on what people were doing in production, we would selectively choose the kinds of tests that we would run. And so we were able to reduce our runtime significantly to about 40 minutes. And this is sort of probably easier said than done in many cases. In my case, it was actually doable because so much of what we do is authentication. And so we have a ton of tests that do, SAML or OAuth or form-based login or whatever. And so it's really easy to know, like, is someone actually logging into this app or not? And if they're not logging in, over the past 30 days, then we're not going to bother testing it. And when they start doing that, we will start testing it. But I think probably for a lot of other business models, this may not be as straightforward. But we kind of got lucky that way. Another great thing that was happening as we were moving to Git and as we were selectively testing and sort of cutting down our tests to the ones that were truly relevant was we were developing a way to deploy Jenkins in a really automated and straightforward and foolproof way. And one of the great things about Jenkins is that it's a web application, it has this beautiful UI that anyone can go and sort of interact with and update values and create new jobs. But when you're actually deploying Jenkins, it can be kind of a nightmare because you deploy it and then you set up some environment variables and you accidentally introduce some typo and then you spend several hours trying to figure out why everything's broken. So this actually saved us huge amounts of time, and we were able to build out a bunch of scripts that basically have the static resources that Jenkins uses, the war and the plugins and etc., copies them over to the installation directory, and then we just used a templating engine that's packaged with Django, Jinja 2, and basically did simple variable replacement and conditionals. And then we had all of the job data stored in Python code. So we said, for this job, these are the attributes of this job. For this type of server, these are the attributes for this type of server. And so we could really quickly and in an automated way deploy lots and lots of Jenkinses if we wanted to, or we could deploy a master Jenkins with a bunch of slaves, and it was really easy and quick. So this is the code for that. I think I may actually try and open source this. I don't know if this is useful for people or not, but it's very straightforward, but it was very useful for us. So here's the picture of where we are basically now with all these things. Developers work in topic branches that they check out off the main line, And then every time they check in a change to their topic branch and push it to origin, to Git, that automatically kicks off all of these tests in a slave Jenkins. And then once that's done running, it sends an email back to the developer and says, it passed, it didn't pass. So the developer knows all the time what's going on. And then when the developer says, okay, I'm done with my feature, I'm ready to merge it into the mainline, they include the links to these passing tests, all of the build, deploy, and Selenium. And then they issue a pull request that includes those links, and there's a human person, another peer, who looks over it and then approves it, and it's merged into the integration branch. And then our integration branch is suddenly now blue. And the issues that we're seeing in integration are truly integration issues, because system A worked fine, or change A worked fine, change B worked fine, but when they came together, they introduced a problem. And this was honestly just so awesome. We've been trying to do this for a year, and we've been doing incremental steps, and I feel like the dream is finally realized, where we can really say, okay, we have all these Selenium tests, people are adding new tests, changing features, and we know that things are good, and we're not wasting anybody's time. And the return on investment with all of this automation and test automation is really starting to pay off, because we really don't have to do a lot of time. We really don't spend a lot of time testing or looking at test results. So these were kind of the keys for us to get here. Probably this year we're going to be adding more Selenium tests and hopefully continuing along this pattern. We're also looking at trying to generate Selenium tests. I don't know if any of you guys have tried to do that, but that's really interesting to me. And then we're also trying to move to a daily push cycle to production, and then hopefully a per change list push to production. And we'll need to update our DevOps and our production tools so that we can roll back quickly in order to do that first. But that's definitely something we want to do this year. And then we're also looking at some really awesome, groundbreaking, revolutionary tools and services like Mogo Test that we're excited about, and some other guys. So anyway, there were not just me involved in this project. There were actually a lot of people. Everyone contributed. The whole team really did, but especially these folks, Todd, Matt, Chris, John, and Emiliano, and basically everyone on the engineering team. So that was, thank you guys. And questions? So the way we have it set up right now is we actually have a master Jenkins, and then that master Jenkins has a number of slaves. And those slaves can be added or subtracted depending on how much we need, but there's a hook in Jenkins that listens in our repo for any branch, any change in any branch, and automatically sends that job off to a slave. And then if we use all the slaves up, then they're queued. Yeah. We don't do a lot of A/B testing. I used to work at Netflix in my past life, and they A/B tested the crap out of everything. That's basically their whole business model. And it was extremely hard to automate testing for them for that reason. Yeah, that's tough. I don't know if I have an answer for that.
What's the problem?
Well, they're just constantly changing the front end to measure, different things. And so if you're constantly adding UI and new elements on the page, and then you're updating your regression tests, it's difficult to sort of abstract that in a way that can kind of be left to run long term. How do you deal with A/B testing in Selenium? So that's a good point, actually. I was concerned about A/B testing because it basically changes the UI all the time, and that's hard to deal with a lot of kind of set it and forget it Selenium test writing. But also the randomness. So the way we dealt with that at Netflix was we had a backdoor API that we could call and say, okay, set it to this one. Yeah. The question isn't it really just rapidly changing UI is still testable? Isn't it really just that kind of designing your code properly so that you can kind of reuse things? And yes, that's true. If you work closely with the front-end developer or whoever's doing the page layout, you guys can probably find a good way of designing it so that the stuff that you're referencing is really kind of remains stable as other things are changing. Yeah. We're not actually seeing a lot of bugs in production, but we are interested in trying it because it's a new service that sounds really interesting, and I think probably more it'll be like exploratory testing and sort of usability testing, but it does seem like a really interesting idea. Like, okay, just get a group of random people from all over the country or all over the world, what do they think? How do they use it? So yeah, definitely value in that. So how do you deal with Firefox constantly updating their current version, like Chrome, but different? We've had a hard time with that. We basically test 3.6 and 7, and we sort of upgrade every so often. And but yeah, it's definitely been hard for us because we have a Firefox plugin. So.
Are there people here at Mozilla that are?
Yeah. Is there anyone here that might be able to answer that question?
Mozilla gets bitten by that all the time.
Stop doing that. So how do we? Okay. So the question is, how do we organize our tests? How granular are they? How do we store our test data? So one thing that we had done really well, actually, before I got there, was everyone had written the tests according to the page object model that I think was first sort of introduced by Google a while ago. So we had a really good kind of object-oriented design that was extensible and really according to best practice. So that was great. How do we organize test data? So we did not organize it very well when I first started, but we slowly kind of basically changed things around. So we basically use a lot of RESTful services. So there's a lot of APIs that we call now that we wrote that will do things that we need on the fly. We don't like to store data in files or seed the database with static data. We try to avoid doing that. We are currently testing against a locally deployed instance of the application, and so we're sort of constrained in that way. We really can only run somewhere between 50 and 100 threads at once, and hopefully at some point we'll be able to automate the deployment of our application into a more production-like system, like a real cluster. And at that point, hopefully we'd be able to really go wild on upping the thread count. That would be cool. So the question is, why do you have multiple Jenkins instances? Why don't you just use a master Jenkins and have a bunch of slaves? Mostly because it's kind of a remnant of probably being a little bit too sloppy. We should probably do everything as a master slave. But we do have a lot of one-off projects or kind of other things that we build. So we have a lot of permutations of what the Jenkins needs to have in it and how it should run and what the environment should be. So I think it might be kind of partially a factor of that. Some of these things are just wildly different. One Jenkins is building and testing, our Windows 8 Active Directory agent that needs to be run and built in a totally different way. So we currently split tests. We tiered them into groups. So we have 3 groups basically of Selenium tests. We have a bunch of other kinds of tests and stuff, but Selenium tests we have our core group, which is sort of critical functionality for all of the web application and how people interact with it. And then we have our app tests that are kind of mostly form-based, and then we have our plugin app tests, which are more kind of sophisticated. So all of those things run on one machine. We're not marshalling tests out to different Jenkinses. Each Jenkins runs the same kind of test run with the same test selection. But we generally try and split tests logically and with importance level, and then we do that with testng group tags, which is really useful. So the comment was we should open source the Jenkins instance generation or deployment generation and deployment, and that's awesome. I'm glad you guys would find that useful, and also if you have any ideas for snarky names, let me know, because I have no idea what to call it. Because it really is so weirdly simple, but yet so incredibly useful. The Jenkinizer, that's good. And then thoughts on Selenium test generation. I haven't thought about it too deeply as far as practically how I would do it, but it just seems like something that you should be able to do, especially for our system, for things that we just do over and over again in slightly different ways. If we could abstract out some of those things, I think it should be doable. For other systems, it might be a little bit more difficult. But I mean, of course, the dream is you just have an HTML file and you kind of feed it into this generator tool, and it just spits out these beautiful page object model, extensible, reusable Selenium code. But I don't know how that would work. I wonder if there's research going on in that area. I'm guessing there must be.
I was thinking you were talking about test factories and test engineers.
Well, yeah, there's that, but not specifically. Yeah.
Do you guys use WebDriver, or do you use
Sadly, no, we don't use WebDriver. We're still using Selenium version 1, and that is a project that we must implement this year. So we consider Chrome to be our kind of master golden browser, and then Firefox is a close second, and then probably IE 8 and then IE 9 maybe. We put it in that those ranking. We tried it. Okay, so the question is, do Selenium tests do end-to-end testing, or do they just do one test? So we try to do just one page per test. But sometimes, it's in order to get the page in the right state, you have to go through kind of a complicated flow. And so in that case, we would do that. We still have one teeny little bootstrapping that we do, which is basically we create a super user account in the system. And then aside from that, everything's generated on demand. Is that question clear? So the question was, do you guys have any data that you require in the database for test runs? Yeah, so we totally have that problem. So the problem is, do you guys test against third parties that are running out in the wild? And obviously, yes, we do. We don't, we integrate with Salesforce, and, we don't really have access to their test systems, and we have no idea when they're going to release, and we change code on production. And yet we still have to know if it's working, if our integration with them is working. So that's an interesting problem that we have some ideas on how we're going to solve long term. But the short term solution that we've done is basically we run these tests sort of on demand when there's changes, and then we look at trends. And then, if there are, if something's failing consistently, we know that it's, if something fails for 3 times, we know it's a real problem, or, if it only fails once. But I think what we'll end up doing for that is we'll probably do some kind of real-time monitoring of our production system, and have some kind of thing that basically phones home and says, okay, this failed. And then if we get enough of those calls back, we'll have some heuristic that says, okay, this failed enough times that it's not just some random password problem, but it's a real problem, and we'll say, okay, ding, 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 it's broken, and it'll be kind of sort of like QA and production monitoring are sort of fusing into one thing there. But that's really the only way we can do it. Do we manually look at production usage and then update the tests manually? No, we don't. We run code that does that. So we basically have access to the production data, and we say, okay, what apps have been in use in the past 30 days? And then we take those apps and we do a bunch of sorting and searching through our test source, and we do pattern matching and find tests related to that. So the question is, how do you guys deal with UI bugs, with layout problems? Functionally, the page works, but it's not rendering properly in IE 7. And that is an awesome question, because I'm so excited about this new service called Mogo Test that we're trialing right now. One of the contributors that did a lot of work with a Selenium grid started a company named Mogo Test, and basically what he's done is completely revolutionary. He takes the page and he models it in a way that can be algorithmically compared with the way it's rendered in another page in another browser, and then he can tell you very accurately if there's a layout difference. So if something looks fine in Firefox, but in IE 7, some div is totally off, he'll be able to alert on that, and it's really exciting and amazing stuff. So I highly recommend checking that out, because Selenium is great for functional, does it actually work, but it won't find some of those layout problems. So can you use Scout for that? Yeah, you can use Scout if you want to kind of...
You use Scout.
No, we don't. I don't think we do, but okay. All right. You can do it in Scout manually if you want to log in and check things out. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys.
We have one last question?
Is that it? Okay.
Join me in thanking Denali.
Thanks.
That was fantastic.
Thank you.